Hey guys, Constance here. Welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So I am under one of my bean trellises and I thought this would be kind of a fun place to start my garden tour. Now last week I wasn't able to film one because the weather just did not cooperate with me. We had lots and lots of storms that rolled through, and so it's now been 2 weeks since my last tour, which means quite a bit has happened in the garden in that 2-week time. So of course the very first thing I want to show you is the bean trellis. We have got beans all over the place, and these right here are the purple pod pole beans, and over on this side I have the NT half runners, which are just beginning to produce as well. The purple pod pole beans start producing a little bit faster than the NT half runners, but not by much with these two trellises. And so today is actually going to be my first harvest of the beans for the year, so I'll be doing that here in just a little bit. So last year when I grew my beans, I grew them on horizontal cattle panels, just going the long way, and it was nowhere near enough room for them to climb on. And so this year I took cattle panels and I cut them in half and I put them up vertically, giving them much more height to grow on. And pardon, the chickens are over there in the coop going crazy because it's egg laying time. So the beans still do reach the top, they still do get even taller than the trellis, but this does give them a little bit more room to grow on. Down here on the ground I have purple sweet potatoes. I started the sweet potatoes from slips that I started myself from some purple sweet potatoes that I had gotten through Asia Standard. So I don't actually know what variety of sweet potatoes they are or if they'll even grow very well, but you know, I had some space and I'm all about experimenting in the garden. Right down here I have a patch of Tulsi Basil, that's holy basil or sacred basil as well. And I like to grow this because number one, the fragrance coming from this basil is absolutely amazing. But it is a great way to bring in the pollinators for your garden. As you can see, I've got bees all over it. Right down here in the next spot, I have another variety of sweet potatoes. These have been grown from slips that I purchased at my local farm supply store, farm and garden store, and they are the classic orange Beauregard variety of sweet potatoes. And down at the end of this bed, this is a gigantic patch of oregano, and this is something I planted a couple of years ago, and it never fully dies in the winter. It just does really well here all the time. So over here in the corner of the garden I have a lilac bush. I absolutely love lilacs. This in particular is called Texas lilac, and again this is something that I planted for the pollinators. As I've shared before, my planting style is what's called potager or potager, and it's a mixture of your edible plants and your flowering pretty plants, and I just think it makes for a lovely environment in the garden. And while I love the flowers and all of that, so do the bees. And so having things like this out in your garden area or near your garden to bring in those pollinators is just going to help your garden grow. So this raised bed here behind me is one of my newer raised beds. I put in three new raised beds this year. Every year I kind of add a little bit more and modify things. And I put in this raised bed this year, and as I've talked about in some of my previous videos, I had an issue with the soil that went in. This is a brand of soil that I have used in the past, and I've never had an issue with it. However, this year, essentially what I'm finding is that the soil was basically depleted. Now this bed here, I've been able to save my plants. These are all varieties of tomato plants, and my go-to for this bed has been the ever so stinky fish emulsion, as well as magnesium, Epsom salt. Tomatoes, peppers, there's a lot of plants that really love that magnesium. And as soon as I started treating this bed with not only the magnesium, but also that fish emulsion, everything just greened up and just has been taking off. And this entire bed, which I thought was just going to be a total loss, is now actually producing. So one of the first tomatoes that I have found in this bed is right here, and this is the Florida 91 variety of tomatoes. It is a hybrid, and I got the seeds from Haas Tools. This variety is geared towards climates that are very hot and humid. And I am in garden zone 7B, northern Alabama, and hot and humid is essentially a synonym for where I live. I have another one down here that has, it looks like the very first little baby tomato right there. And this is actually an Abe Lincoln tomato plant. It is my first time growing this variety. I actually have quite a few varieties that I'm growing for the first time this year as far as tomatoes goes. I have certain ones that I grow every year, hands down, no matter what, such as the Dr. Weish tomatoes, the Black Vernissage tomatoes. But every year I do like to kind of branch out and try different things. My squash bed here has just been going absolutely crazy. Now, when I first planted this and everything was first coming up, some of the seedlings in the middle were looking really, really rough. And so what I did was I put a shade cloth up here, and we're really overcast today, so I don't have it covering the plants. But most days when it's super hot and sunny out here, I will drape this over the top and at least protect the plants from the southern and western sides. And as soon as I started doing that, all of the plants just started really taking off. Now I have noticed a couple spots down here where I'm starting to get some fungus, and so I will treat this with some neem oil this evening. Now I do it in the evening, of course, because in the evening there's less chance of accidentally getting bees with the neem oil or anything like that. And in the evenings, well, I mean really in the afternoons, when it comes to squash blossoms, they're closed. Squash blossoms are really only open in the mornings, but I will wait until evening anyways to come out here and do this. So this section right in here in the front, or on the end of the bed, this is Ford Hook zucchini, and this has always been my best producing variety of zucchini. You can see I've got another one down in there to get picked. You can see right down in there. Just classic green zucchini. Right down in here in the middle, this is Golden Delight zucchini. This is a new variety for me to be trying out. I just thought, you know, it's always nice to have a little variety. And then down on the end, it was more of the classic green Ford Hook zucchini. Now over here on this side, I planted Zucchini Rampakante, and it is doing really well. I have got squash all over the place here. Now this particular variety, it's my first time growing this one, and so I actually had to look up when to harvest this. And this particular one, you can harvest the plants when they're young and green and just use them like zucchini or other typical summer squash. Or you can allow them to stay on the vine until they are orange and hard, in which case they become a lot like a butternut squash. So I'm actually doing a little bit of both this time around. I have one down in here that I am letting stay on the vine, and you can actually see it's beginning to get that peachy orange color just a little bit. And then I have plenty of other ones that I'll be able to harvest while they're young and tender, and you know, cook them up, pan fry them, saute them with some butter and seasoning and all of that good stuff. Now, this other raised bed in here is one that in the past I have grown pepper plants, and this year I decided to swap them out for tomatoes. A number of different varieties. This one is Tachi tomatoes. I've got some Berkeley pink tie-dye. This one is also a Berkeley pink tie-dye, and you can see I've got some little bitty baby tomatoes in there. Over on the other side, you can see where I have planted some purple basil, and I always come in here and take off any heads that begin to flower. That way it'll keep on producing lots and lots of leaves. So this week I actually had my first tomato hornworms of the season, or tobacco hornworms. I don't know which variety they are, but they're a hornworm, and they are just the enemy of tomato plants. And so I came out here in the evening. I'll do it a couple times a week. Come out after dark, take my UV flashlight and kind of shine it, because of course hornworms kind of glow in the dark when you hit them with a UV light. You know, your plants will all have kind of a purple color, and the second that UV light hits one of those hornworms, it's like a neon green color. So it makes them really easy to spot, because during the day in the sunlight they just look like a rolled up tomato leaf. And so it makes them really hard to find. Now, I did actually find 2 of them while it was light out. The first indicator is usually one of 2 things. Either you found stripped stems, not a single leaf and nothing but a stem left, or you find the poop. And I mean, it's obviously poop. It looks like round balls, almost looks like miniature horse manure. And if you see that, then basically just look straight up, and chances are you might be able to find them. And so that is how I found 2 of them. Went out that night with my UV light, found 1 more. So far I haven't found any more. I haven't seen any more signs of them, but I will continue to come out here again every few days or so, a couple times a week, and just do a walk through the garden with that UV light. In my next garden bed, these are no-till, no-dig garden beds. I've got peppers on this side, and I have a variety of them. This is a jalapeno. It's basically a jalapeno pepper that has no heat. These 2 are Brazilian starfish peppers. These 2 are Buena Mulata peppers. I've actually got my first pepper on this plant right here. You can see those. Looks like a cayenne pepper, except it's purple. I've got some lipstick peppers, touchdown bell pepper. This right here is one of my zinnias, and this just came back as a volunteer. Back in there I've got a jalapeno pepper plant. That one right there I believe is a Chinese 5 color. This is a Lushar paprika plant. a Jalapeno, and then that one was actually a mystery one because I had lost the tag. And just judging by the leaves, it's either a Chinese 5-color or a Buena Mulata. And then right down here, I've got a couple more zinnias, again, volunteers. I actually planted very few zinnias this year, just because I've planted so many in the past and had so many volunteers that have come back that last year that whole side of that bed was almost taken over by zinnias. There were just so many. It actually got to where I could barely walk down the rows. And so this year I really only planted a couple in different places, and the areas like right here where I knew last year there was a ton of zinnias, I didn't even plant any because I knew chances were they would probably come back, and as you can see, they did. Okay, right down here at the bottom of this arched trellis, I have planted some Chinese noodle beans. Last year I planted them down on the other trellis, and so this year I'm putting them right here. Now these are getting a tiny bit of pest damage, but overall not too bad. You know, I haven't even actually sprayed them with anything. Over on this side, these are my Kajari melons, which I will, you know, gradually kind of train them to go up the trellis. Down here at the bottom of this trellis, I have some Chrysanthemum Melons, and they kind of got started late because I had issues with a lot of my seedlings just vanishing. Whether it was slugs or birds, I don't know. And so I restarted some from seeds in a pot, and just this week have come out here and put them in the ground. I was waiting for them to get at least a pair of true leaves before I planted them out here to give them their best chance. And we're back around to the bean trellis where we started. Right down in here you can see a ton of okra. Every bit of that is volunteers. And I have actually thinned out and removed probably 2/3 of the plants that came up. I said in the past that we really don't eat enough okra to warrant me dedicating space to them or even planting them. But as you can see, when I said that, I made the comment that even though I'm not going to plant it again, we'll still have okra in the garden, probably in perpetuity. Now, I don't know if it'll actually last that long. However, we clearly have okra. Now, the variety that I had planted here last year was the Alabama Red, and from what I can remember, this was a spineless variety. I'll know for sure once it grows up, but if I remember correctly, it was. And it grew prolifically, and it grew, of course, red okra. And right down in there, you can see I have a watermelon plant. Got some blossoms on it there. These were just some starts, some watermelon starts that I had picked up at my local garden supply store, and they were a crimson sweet watermelon. And as you can see, there are more okra seedlings popping up everywhere. Right down here on the end, I have a few volunteer pepper plants, and these are second-year volunteers. They were volunteers last year as well. I had planted Tabasco peppers down here, and since I planted them, I've been getting them every year. Alright, right down in here we have more Tulsi Basil. Again, all volunteers, second year of volunteers. I've got some random volunteer zinnias here and there. Over on the other side of the trellis, I have some tomato plants, and I've got some tomatoes growing on them. That right there is a Blue Beauty. You can see they're already kind of changing colors. I've got some that are further along out in the other garden. This is my Comfrey Patch. I grow this to use as a green fertilizer, and you can make liquid fertilizer out of this as well. I have a video where I talk all about that, and I will link it down below. Over here I have some crimson coneflower and some Denver daisies. These are some perennial splashes of color that the pollinators love. Let's see, Right down in here I have angel face snapdragons and some more volunteer zinnias and my next bean trellis. And again, on one side I put the purple pod pole beans and NT half runners on the other side. And I have got lots of beans to come out here and pick this afternoon. Right in here I've got my dill patch, and I mentioned in a video the other day how I was pretty sure that the mama birds had gotten all of my swallowtail caterpillar babies, and I think that is the case, because I have looked and looked and looked and I have not found a single caterpillar anywhere. So while I'm sad that the caterpillars are gone, I'm happy that I'll actually be able to harvest dill for the first time, because usually those caterpillars just strip my dill bare. Down here at the bottom of the trellis by the Chinese noodle beans, I have another patch of flowers. And these are mostly perennials, and I've actually got a couple volunteers as well. That right there I did plant. That is pineapple sage, which will give beautiful deep red flowers at the very end of summer. But right down in here, this is a volunteer zinnia, and I've got a couple volunteers down there. Looks like sunflowers maybe. This is stone crop, which you can see is beginning to flower. This is kind of a succulent sort of feeling plant, but it is a perennial flower. And then right down here I have one of my patches of Egyptian walking onions. These are a perennial type of onion, and the heads at the top will form little onions like this. The stalk will get heavy, it'll fall to the ground and start a whole new cluster. But you can use these like scallions, you can use them kind of like shallots. They're a little bit small, but they have that kind of mild oniony flavor. But again, they're perennials, so they will just keep on producing. And then I have all of these tomato plants over here on the other side. There's peppers over there. And again, it's a number of different varieties. Here we've got Bella Rosa. That one's another Bella Rosa. This one here is an orange icicle. None of these have produced anything yet, but it's kind of early in the season, and these are a paste tomato variety. This is another one of those new ones for me. This one is a Hungarian heart, which is also a paste tomato. Now over here next to this other bean trellis, I actually have some eggplant, and it had some early pest damage, but I kind of got that under control with the neem oil and things like that. And for the first time, I have got an eggplant, which I think is just about ready to harvest. So I'm very excited about that. Last year was the very first year that I tried to grow eggplant. And as soon as I planted it in the garden, it was just getting devoured by pests. And this year as well, as soon as I put it in the garden, I instantly had Colorado potato beetles. Something I had never seen in my garden before, but apparently they really like eggplant. And so I was able to get them under control, and so hopefully we will get a few more eggplants. But every year there's something to be a challenge. Down here on the end of this bed, I have got more zinnias, and I don't remember if I planted these or if they were volunteers, but I've got them either way. And I've got another sunflower down in there. And then right here, growing up on the trellis, is Delicata Squash. Alright guys, so I'm out in the front garden, which is my raised bed garden, and the tomato plants out here, many of them are much further along than the ones out in the big garden, because these are the ones that survived our little incident with the late freeze, and I lost most of my tomato plants and had to start them from scratch. But these were the survivors, so I've got much more developed tomatoes out here. We've got some Dr. Weish tomatoes. These are Berkeley pink tie-dyes. Down here along the front I've got all sorts of herbs. I've got purple sage. This is lemon variegated thyme. This is a variegated marjoram down there. Some silver posy thyme with variegated leaves as well. I've got some lemon sage down here and lots more tomatoes. These right in here are black vernisage. They are a saladette sized tomato that are a striped variety, and when they ripen they will have deep burgundy and green stripes. They're very pretty tomatoes, and they are Mr. Smith's favorite variety when it comes to flavor. He said they are the best tasting tomatoes he has ever had. Over here on the end I have one of my clusters of bee balm. Down below that I've got some daikon radishes that I'm letting go to seed as companion plants for my cucumbers, which I have down in here. These are Chicago pickling cucumbers, and over around the corner on that trellis I have Armenian stripe cucumbers. So over here in this bed I have a number of different peppers, like out there in the other garden. In the center I've got some cosmos. These are the double Dutch cosmos, is I believe what they were called, and they are just beginning to flower. So over there I had the Armenian striped cucumbers, and over on this side of the trellis I have Chinese python beans. Another new thing for me to try this year. And down there in the far corner I have some ground cherries. I have a few of those tucked here and there. So here you can see the gorgeous Blue Beauty tomatoes. These are a great slicing tomato. They're not as big as like a Dr. Weish tomato, but they have great flavor, gorgeous color. The more sunlight they get, the more purple they become. Here I have a couple different varieties of basil, some cinnamon basil, and you can see I've got lots and lots of tomatoes over here. We've got Dr. Weish, we've got more of the black vernisage tomatoes, and there is a whole bunch of those all through here. Right up here at the top of this plant, you can see how the stems are just completely stripped bare. This is where I found the hornworms on my plants. I had like one right here and one right over there. And so I was able to take care of those promptly. In this bed, I have some of the magnolia tendril peas that I have just been letting dry so that I could collect the seeds for next year. Down here in the corner I have a dahlia variety that I planted. There's some thyme down in there. This right here is cardinal basil. I've got some Israeli melons that I will have growing up the trellis here. This down in here is a mix of blue Monday sage and pink Sunday sage. Just lovely flowering sage. We've got some chives, some tricolor sage, some silver posy thyme. There's a sunflower in here, and all of this is cucumber melons, which is a first for me to grow. Mr. Smith wanted to give these a try. Down here I've got some Thai basil. This is some lettuce that I've just let go to flowers so that I can collect seeds. Down in there we've got some blanket flowers. Alright, so my battery actually died right there, and right as the battery died, the farrier called us He was 20 minutes out, and so I had to stop what I was doing and went and did that. And then of course needed to cool down a little bit because, as you can see, the sun decided to come out. The clouds have completely vanished and it got hot. So I went in the house for a bit to cool down, but I wanted to come out here and finish up out here and show you the rest of the garden. Alright, so this bed over in here are all tomato varieties that are actually kind of new to me. I think there's only one in here that I've grown before, but these were some starts that I picked up at my local feed and seed store after we had our little disaster with the freeze and I lost most of my tomato starts. Down at the bottom I've got, these are some lantanas. I've got some cosmos right in there that I obviously just planted. And some more herbs. This is a creeping thyme variety. I've got some flowers. This is called autumn sage. Some more of the tricolored sage down there, and this is some more of that pineapple sage that flowers in the late summer. And I have a few random volunteer peppers because this entire bed was peppers last year. I'm not sure what varieties these are, but with the coloration in the leaves, there's these two here and there's another one over there. That one's got a lot of variegation on the leaves. I know the sun is super bright, so you probably can't see those colors, but I'm guessing that these might be jigsaw peppers. So right down in here, you can see the yellow pear tomatoes. Mr. Smith is really excited to try these this year, as they are another one of the new varieties, new to us varieties. Now this bed down here is another one that was new and another one that I had the issues with the soil. Now these tomato plants do look like they are beginning to recover a little bit. They're getting some green to them. They're not so sickly yellow as they were. I don't know if they'll recover as much as the other bed has, but they are definitely showing some improvement, so I've got my fingers crossed. The other bed, the third bed that I had put in with that soil, is back there in the far corner. It was just a small bed that I put in for some red raspberries that I had been growing since they were about yay big. And as with the tomatoes, the raspberry plants look like they're greening up. I've been feeding them and amending the soil, and so hopefully they recover as well. And then my little loofah gourds down here are coming along, and actually, now that I think about it, I had more than the 3 raised beds, because these 2 little beds were also with that same soil, which I have been amending and feeding and all of that, and so I am hopeful that these will do well. Although I will say that last year I grew loofah intentionally out here on a trellis. Didn't get a single loofah out of it. Had a random loofah plant come out of the compost area, the old compost area, completely neglected. I never watered it. I never did anything with it. And I had loofahs all over the place. So it just seemed like the less you did with it, the better the plants did. So maybe loofah doesn't need super rich soil. I don't know. But in any case, I'm doing my best to grow these, especially since they were a gift. These loofah plants. Alrighty, and there is the front garden. Everything is coming along, everything is looking wonderful, and harvesting is starting to begin. Again, if you are new here, we are located in northern Alabama, Garden Zone 7B, and I take you through the garden, and I do tours like this pretty much every single week unless we get rained out. But they happen all through the garden season, from the very beginning all the way until the end of the growing season. And then in the autumn, when I do a little bit of gardening, then I share occasional updates on that as well. And I do at least 3 videos every week here on the channel of homesteading, home cooking, and back to basics. The easiest way to stay up to date on everything that is taking place is to sign up for my free newsletter, and you can get everything in your inbox. So thanks for joining me here again at A Good Life Farm. I will talk to y'all next time.